My mother informed me of this immediately after my father's burial. Frankly, I had no desire to discuss the inheritance on the day my father passed away. However, Emily Everly initiated the conversation with enthusiastic eyes. "There's a will as well." Emily continued the discussion while proudly presenting the will. "Just after Dad went to the hospital, Mom and I visited his room and had him draft this. Dad immediately agreed to leave neither inheritance nor anything to you, sis. Dad did that, yes, he did that, even though he always depended on you. I know it's too severe. It's pitiful for you, isn't it? But of course, Dad always found me more agreeable and favored me. No way." Before I could say anything else, my mother continued cheerfully, "You, who have no job, we have no intention of giving you a single penny from the inheritance. We'll be enjoying a trip abroad, so prepare to vacate this house by the time we return." Wait, how can I accept this? Why would you do such a thing without giving me a chance to speak? Mom and Emily replied coldly, "Be quiet. It's impossible for you to get anything from us now that Dad's gone. We can finally act freely. Your role here is done, so leave immediately. All the sacrifices you've made for Dad, all you've done for him, and this is the result. How heartless. Giving everything for such an ungrateful father was pointless. Even if you wish for our assistance now, it's belated." Upon hearing those words, any remaining familial sentiments toward my mother and Emily completely vanished. I couldn't embrace what they said about my father, whom I deeply admired. Without articulating all I desired to convey to my mother and Emily, I replied, "I comprehend. I cannot remain with you two any further. I will willingly depart." Subsequently, I departed from my childhood residence. My name is Ashley. I have a sister, Emily, who is 4 years younger than me. We are a family of 4 with our 2 parents. Emily's disposition resembles our mother's. She is amiable but at times indolent. She frequently taunted my father and me, who possess genuine personalities. Our mother, possessing a temperament akin to Emily, displayed particular fondness for her during our childhood. It was evident she favored Emily over me. Whenever she socialized with her friends, my mother would exclusively take Emily along, often excluding me. At home, according to her, it is shameful to present unassuming and reserved Ashley to my acquaintances. Conversely, my mother took great pride in Emily, who was sociable and adored by everyone. Despite having such a mother and sister, the reason I could lead my days positively was due to my father. He esteemed my sincerity and also cherished Emily equally. I profoundly appreciated and loved my father's impartial demeanor. Even after attaining adulthood, my mother's treatment towards me remained unaltered. Nonetheless, owing to my father's presence, our household remained steady. However, following my father's retirement at 65, the incident took place at the residence. He stumbled over a small stair inside the building and fractured his bone. Despite making a strong effort with medical procedures and therapy, his aging muscles did not recuperate easily. As he spent more time confined to bed and required assistance, my mother and Emily became even more distant towards him. "Hey Mom, what's your opinion on this?" "Yes, it appears satisfactory. The food also seems delightful. Perhaps we should select this option." While perusing a travel guide, my mother and Emily conversed enthusiastically. "What are you discussing?" When I inquired, my mother responded with a touch of irritation. "We're planning a family excursion, but considering Dad's mobility challenges, won't traveling be difficult for him?" In response to my remark, Emily said with a grin, "Well, we're not considering bringing him along in the first place. We intend to leave him at home." "That's heartless. It will be tough for him if he's left by himself. If Dad isn't coming, I will stay at home with him." After expressing this, my mother and Emily simply exchanged smiles. Subsequently, my mother remarked, "That's acceptable as well. In that case, Emily and I will just go by ourselves. Whether you two come or not is up to you, but since it's a family trip, we'll be using funds from Dad's bank account. A brief look at the travel guide revealed they had selected accommodations meant for only 2 individuals. It was evident they had never intended to bring either my father or me along. Following that, my mother and Emily frequently went out on their own, staying at upscale lodgings or dining at esteemed restaurants, eateries. It was almost as though neither my dad nor I were acknowledged in the residence. I observed their behavior from afar, striving to complete my tasks as swiftly as possible to attend to my father. When I couldn't manage everything by myself, I sought assistance from care services for duties, such as aiding with bathing or accompanying my father on brief strolls around the area. On days when I had to work extra hours, I requested my mother and Emily to take care of my father, but they shunned the responsibility. "Hello, I've come to assist with the bath, but is there no one at home today?" Upon receiving a notification from the care service personnel, I promptly contacted my mother and Emily. Despite having informed them of the staff's visit beforehand, they had left my father unattended and gone out. When they eventually returned home, I confronted them, but there was no apology from them. The personnel are experts, right? It's fine even if we're not there. Dad is an adult. He'll be okay being left alone. We don't want our time occupied caring for him like you. It seemed they genuinely believed they were doing nothing wrong. I realized I couldn't depend on them and decided that looking after my father was my responsibility. I managed work and caregiving. The daily routine was far from simple, especially since neither my mother nor Emily displayed any concern or empathy. My father's condition deteriorated as the days passed. He spent more time seated than walking and ate much less. As the 9th year of tending to my father approached, I grew worried about his fragile appearance. When I brought him to the hospital, I received a startling diagnosis. "Your father has advanced cancer." It cannot be. I realized that we might not have much time left with him. Determined to assist him in his final days, I resigned from my job to take care of him full-time. I knew I had to inform my mother and Emily. Their responses were unexpected. When I informed them about his condition, my mother remarked, "Really? He never drank or smoked. It's unfortunate that such a genuine person ended up with cancer." Emily, with a shocked expression, said, "I can't believe you'd give up your job to take care of Dad. I'd never make that choice. I thought they would be worried about him, but they showed no signs of it at all." I was genuinely surprised by their indifference, as if it was someone else's business. In the end, the 2 of them only visited him at the hospital for a brief period and never really came to pay a proper visit. I supported him daily during his chemotherapy treatments. Despite our best efforts, we couldn't halt the cancer's progression, and 6 months later, he passed away. The days after the diagnosis went by in a haze. Upon learning of his death, my mother and Emily started a private discussion and left me to organize the funeral on my own. Then they vanished somewhere. I didn't even have time to grieve for my father, as I had to organize the funeral on my own. As the funeral commenced, my mother appeared and began to deliver the primary mourner's speech. In spite of having accomplished nothing, she wore a facade for the public. I was annoyed by her conduct, but the funeral proceeded smoothly. Exhausted as I made my way home, I was summoned to the living room by my mother and Emily, who had already returned, stating they had something to discuss. Without any regard for my fatigue, my mother suddenly announced, "Concerning your father's legacy, Emily and I will inherit this residence and all other possessions." Honestly, I wasn't in the mood to talk about inheritance on the very day my father passed away. However, Emily Everly added, "We even have a valid will." Look, she proudly presented a document and began to explain. Right after Dad was admitted to the hospital, Mom and I visited him and had him sign this. It states that you won't inherit anything. Dad consented to it immediately. With a smirk, Emily said, "After all the assistance you provided, it's so heartless, isn't it? Maybe Dad, in the end, favored me over his 2 earnest older daughters." That's impossible. Before I could respond, my mother interrupted with an inappropriate grin. Clearly, Emily is more endearing, though your father always stayed home and had no pastimes. He surely saved a lot, right? Mom even quit her job because of the inheritance, and I took some time off work to relish the inheritance for a while. Before I could say anything, the two of them continued their conversation. My mother then told me, "You who have no occupation won't get a cent from the inheritance. We intend to enjoy a vacation overseas for a period, so you must depart from this location by then." I promptly objected. "Hold on. Do you truly believe what you're doing is correct?" If that's the situation, without allowing me to finish, both my mother and Emily firmly replied, "Be quiet. It's a waste of time trying to claim the inheritance from us. With your father gone, we'll do as we please. Your role here is finished. Please leave this house promptly." To think that after all you sacrificed for Dad, this is what you receive. There was no need to go to such extents for such an incompetent father. It's futile to regret and dwell on it now. Hearing those words, any remaining connection I felt for my mother and Emily was completely severed. I couldn't forgive them for speaking that way about my beloved father. Suppressing what I wanted to say, I calmly informed them, "I comprehend your thoughts. From now on, I can't envision living together with you two. I'll willingly depart." Despite their initial surprise at my acceptance, the two soon smiled smugly together. "Good to know. Once you leave this house, never depend on us again. Our relationship ends here. Whatever happens to you, we want no part in it. Don't even think of reaching out to us." Receiving this intense sentiment from my mother, I packed only my essentials and left the house. A few days after the inheritance discussion, something occurred. The unexpected call came from my mother, who had declared she would sever contact with me. When I answered, I was met with anger. "What have you accomplished? Where has all the funds from your father's account disappeared to? Why are you abruptly calling? Didn't you mention you wouldn't get in touch with me?" Silence. "This is an urgent situation. Give back your father's savings right away. What are you referring to? I left the passbook at the old residence, didn't I? I have no means of accessing it after I departed, but the money in the account has certainly vanished. It's highly unlikely that such a substantial amount of his savings could have vanished so suddenly. I found it suspicious. When you managed to relocate so swiftly without a job, it appeared my mother had assumed that I had wasted my father's money. Mom, haven't you ever checked the account balance before? I haven't bothered with such things. I see. If you had, you would have realized that Dad's savings weren't that much to start with." "What do you mean, his savings where? Where did his retirement funds go?" "Oh, we used it for our marriage ceremony and the new residence. Wedding? New house? I have no clue what you're talking about. I had been in a romantic relationship with a man named Sean, who was in charge of the caregiving service for my father. Our relationship started through our mutual care for my father. I had informed my father about my relationship with Sean shortly after we began dating. Sean proposed. At that time, I was overwhelmed with caregiving and work responsibilities and couldn't make a decision. Upon learning the truth, my father said, "Care for yourself more than me." I won in order to achieve a joyful marriage. He encouraged and supported me. Despite my uncertainties, he even began assisting with the selection of the wedding venue and searching for a new place to live. We had set a wedding date for the next year and also signed a contract for a new apartment that my father approved of. All of this occurred 6 months prior to discovering that he had terminal cancer. As a token of appreciation, my father covered most of the expenses for the wedding and the new apartment. This was the cause of the decrease in the account balance. Upon hearing the turn of events, my mother's voice quivered. She was clearly shaken. So there was no inheritance for us to receive in the first place, mainly just the family home. But considering its location, we shouldn't anticipate a high selling price. Emily, who had overheard the conversation, grabbed the phone from my mother in a panic. "Wait, So the financial aid for your wedding is much greater than the inheritance for Mom and me? That appears to be the situation. Dad was aware of my marriage and my departure from the house, so perhaps he didn't see an issue in leaving the family home to both of you. He might have allocated a substantial amount for me and intended the inheritance to offset that. Could it be that the reason you resigned from your job was because your marriage had been decided upon? That's correct. Sean is also engaged in investment activities and is financially secure. He wanted me to become a full-time homemaker. Additionally, I thought if I resigned early, I could concentrate on caring for our father. I can't believe it. Why did you keep the information about your marriage and savings a secret from us? Taking a deep breath, I replied, I considered telling you multiple times, but every time, neither of you displayed any interest and avoided the subject. Why didn't you prevent me from taking a break from work or Mom from quitting her part-time job? How are we supposed to survive now? When I wanted to converse with you after the funeral, wasn't it you and Mom who shut me down, stating you can't anticipate anything from us, but I believed family should support each other? Family, when I was overwhelmed with work and caregiving, you were out having fun, neglecting Dad. How can I consider someone who said such hurtful things as family? Don't just say whatever is convenient for you. Surprised and at a loss for words, Emily was taken aback. Later, my mother implored with me, Ashley, the truth is, I've already paid for the trip. I also made various purchases, expecting the inheritance. So now I have no savings left. So what about it? I've already quit my part-time job, right? If we don't receive any inheritance money, we won't have any money for next month. So until I find a new job, I hope you can lend us some. When you expelled me from the family home, didn't you say you'd never come to me again? That our relationship was over? That you wouldn't meddle with whatever happens to me in the future? About that, neither of you ever assisted when Dad and I were enduring tough times. Now that you're facing difficulties, do you expect me to be your support? That's remarkably audacious. However, if you refuse to assist us at this moment, what options will we have? I promptly ended the call and blocked their numbers without waiting for my mother to finish. I felt completely repulsed by my mother and sister, who only asserted their family ties when they are in trouble. I made the decision to distance myself from these two. Subsequently, I learned from various sources that despite my mother and Emily canceling their trip, they were unable to obtain a refund due to it being a last-minute cancellation. They have been barely managing, seeking financial help from friends and relatives. They had to sell their house, but as I anticipated, they did not receive as much money as they had hoped for. After covering the initial expenses for a new place and the cost of moving, they had very little money remaining. Emily returned to work, but her relationships with her colleagues became strained because she asked them for money. She had intended to leave her job after finding a suitable partner, but due to the circumstances, that partner and other men distanced themselves. Her friends also did the same. My mother attempted to find another part-time job, but her previous workplace had already hired someone else, making it difficult for her to return. Because of her age, her job prospects were limited. She has been working diligently while facing complaints from younger colleagues. At present, they are managing their living expenses with my mother's modest part-time salary and Emily's earnings, slowly paying off their debts. Both of them appear exhausted. As for me, I managed to hold an intimate wedding at the location my father selected. The only sorrow is that my father couldn't attend my wedding, but I think he's observing our joyful moments from somewhere. My marital journey with Sean has been more seamless than anticipated. We're relishing serene and satisfying days together. I'm forever thankful to my father for endorsing my bond with Sean and granting me this chance. I've had to construct a tranquil life with my spouse, always keeping in mind my appreciation for my father.